We're going to go over how to add and subtract with rational numbers. We're going to be using both positive and negative numbers in the questions today. The rules for adding positive and negative numbers is first you can always identify if the answer choice is going to be positive or negative by looking at the largest number in the problem. Whatever the largest number is, that's going to be the sign for the answer. So that's something important that we need to know. The largest number tells the sign for the answer. Okay? Then, before you know if you really add or subtract, if the numbers have the same sign, like if they're both positive or they're both negative, then you would add. However, if the signs are different and you have one of each, then really you subtract. So I'm going to highlight that as well. If you have the same signs, like positive, positive, or negative, negative, then really you just add. If you have different signs, one of each, it doesn't matter which one comes first, then you actually subtract the numbers. Okay, so let's take a look at a few examples. Okay, the first example, it says 21.5 plus 13.25. These are just two regular numbers, so that's like elementary school. I'm just going to add them together. However, when you have decimals, you need to make sure you line them up. And if they don't line up correctly, you need to add extra zeros. So 21.5 plus, I'm going to go ahead and put in my decimal, 13.25. So the second number has an extra digit behind the decimal, so I'm going to fill in that blank space with a 0. Now, when I add those together, I'm going to get a 5, a 7, carry the decimal down, or bring the decimal down, 4, and 3. So my final answer would be 34.75. Okay, now I'm going to look at the second one. I have a negative and a positive. So I'm going to label those. If you have one of each, a negative and a positive, that really means you should subtract those numbers, not add, because they're different types of numbers. When you subtract, you want to put the biggest one on top. These are just two whole numbers. So honestly, this one should be pretty easy. 16 minus 9 is 7. Now, the number that was the biggest was 16. And it's negative. So that means the answer is going to be negative as well. Final answer, negative 7. All right, the next two examples, it's negative 1.25 and negative 5.25. So when I label these, I have two negative numbers. If the signs are the same, you should really add them. And they both have decimals, so I'm going to line those up. When you add, it doesn't matter which one goes on top. If you want the biggest one on top, it's totally fine. Okay, 5 plus 5, 2 plus 2 plus 1. Bring your decimal down. And remember, these were both negative numbers. This one was the biggest. So the sign is also going to be negative as well. Final answer, negative 6.5 or negative 6.50. Last one for the rules of adding, I have negative 3.7 plus 12. One negative number and one positive number, that really means subtract because they're different. The biggest number needs to go on top, that's 12 minus 3.7. So that has a decimal, but 12 doesn't. So I need to add a decimal for 12 and fill in the blank space with 0. Now I'm going to have to borrow. So the 0 becomes a 10, the 2 becomes a 1. Now I can actually subtract. 10 minus 7 is 3. Bring your decimal down. 1 minus 3, that's not possible, or you could go ahead and think about it as just an 11. 11 minus 3 is 8. The biggest number in this was the 12, and the 12 was positive. That means my answer is going to be positive. Ultimately, you don't have to write the positive symbol in your answer, so just 8.3 is fine. Now let's look at some rules for subtracting when you have positive and negative numbers. The first thing we want to do is check the problem to see if it started subtracting a negative number. If it looks like it has a double negative like this or like this, you want to rewrite the question. These two subtract and negative signs are going to cancel each other out. So two negatives, they're going to squeeze in together and turn into the plus sign. So I'm going to highlight this. When you have two negatives like that, or a negative and a subtract, they turn into a positive. Okay, and I'm going to draw an arrow going down to that so they change. Okay, if the numbers have the same sign and your final question has two positives or two negatives, just like before, you're going to add. Once you rewrite this question and you have different signs, you're going to subtract, so the rules stay the same as before. Okay, same signs, you really add. Different signs, you really subtract. Whoops. Different signs really subtract. Same signs really add. Okay? All right, so now I'm going to look and see if in the center, do I see the double negative? And in this one, I do see a double negative. So that means I'm going to rewrite this question. And those are going to turn into a plus. If you want to rewrite it underneath, you can. The number behind is just now a 5. So when I go back and look at these, I have one negative number now and one positive number now. Those are different signs, so really I should subtract. Okay, 17 minus 5, that is 12. And the biggest number was the negative 17. So that means my answer is going to be negative as well. Negative 12. The second question, I don't see a double negative. This is just a normal subtraction because I have a positive minus a positive. So I can just set that one up like normal. 38 minus 14. 8 minus 4 is 4, and 3 minus 1 is 2. The biggest number was positive, so the answer is going to stay positive. 24. All right, the next two, let's see if we see that double negative sign on this one. Right there in the middle, I see a subtract with a negative. I'm going to highlight that, and it is going to turn into a positive sign. The number in front stays the same, but the number behind now changes to positive. My new question is going to be 25. It's a positive. 36.8 is now also a positive. Those are the same, so really, yes, I should add. Now, it has a decimal in the second number, so I need to line that up. 25 did not have a decimal, so I need to add 1 and fill in the blank space with 0. Now I can add these together. 8 plus 0 is 8. Bring your decimal down. 5 plus 6 is 11. 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 6. The biggest number is now a positive number. So my answer is going to be positive. 61.8. Second question, negative 5.7 minus 0.25. Okay, so this one could be a little tricky. Some people like to go ahead and change this sign and do keep, change, change. If I have it like this, it's a little bit trickier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this question, and I'm going to make it say negative 5.7 plus negative 0.25, just so it's a little bit easier to tell if I should ultimately add or subtract. So now this is a negative number, and this is a negative number, so I should add those. Okay, I'm going to line up the decimals, 5.7 and 0.25. The top number is missing a spot, so I'm going to fill it in with an extra 0. 0 plus 5 is 5. 7 plus 2 is 9. Bring your decimal down. And then 5 plus 0 is 5. Then the biggest number was the 5.7. And remember, in the beginning it was negative, so my final answer is going to be negative. I'll put negative 5.95. So this one little area right here, this was a little bit tricky. So you could do keep, change, change this to be a positive sign, and then change the opposite and make that seem negative.